Neeraj, for summing up all of the market action. But let's move right on then and delve into the fine print of Budget 2016. Supriya Srine, Chief Editor, News 18, now in conversation with Banking Secretary Anjali Duggal as well as Divestment Secretary Neeraj Gupta, talking about the divestment dilemma.
We continue to decode the fine print as far as Budget 2016 is concerned, and two very, very eminent people from North Block joining us right here. Ms. Anjali Duggal, India's Banking Secretary, and of course Mr. Gupta, who heads the Department of Divestment. Let's begin with you, because PSB recapitalization was the big elephant in the room, and everybody was keeping a very keen eye on how much money is the government going to put in. 25,000 crore rupees seems to have fallen short of expectations. What was the rationale with going for a smaller sum when you knew the expectations were rather large?
Let me put it this way. The recapitalization is supposed to take care of the needs and not the expectations in general, right? We are at the end of Q3. We have some results with us. The public sector banks are very actively engaged in their resolution processes and in their recoveries. So actually the elephant in the room is perhaps the AQR,
that's right,
the asset quality review exercise. At the end of this particular quarter, we'll have a better idea of what is really required. 25,000 crores, as the FM quite clearly said, is our first statement of intent of what is going to go into the banks, and then he also said that we stand solidly behind our banks. I think that's good to begin with.
So just before I throw it to Maitri and Mukesh here, is this then to be presumed this is the first tranche only, and have back-of envelope calculations happening on how much more could you put in if the need were to arise? Because we are talking about NPA levels that are high, and the assumption is that once growth kicks in, banks will of course have to lend, and that is where the fund requirement will come in.
And certainly, once the gross advances grow, your denominator is going to become that much bigger. I think one has to remember that the Reserve Bank of India has put a sort of date on this entire exercise, and that is March 17. So going ahead, let's take a look at how aggressively we are able to resolve these stressed assets, and then let's take a look at what is really required.
That's right.
I have lots on the agenda from financial sector's reform standpoint, and part of it may fall under Economic Affairs Ministry. But let me take this opportunity to ask you questions on three specific recommendations which featured in the Finance Minister's speech, and I'm sure that there would be necessary legislative changes. Number one, the Code on Resolution of Financial Firms. To me, it suggests that the Bankruptcy Code of 2015, which is now before the Joint Committee, cannot be implemented until and unless this code comes in, because this specifically appeals to bankruptcy situations for banks and insurance companies. That's my first question. The second is...
one by one?
Sure, please go ahead.
Okay,
yeah, please go ahead.
The first point is this, that the Insolvency and Banking Code, or IBC as we call it, really covers companies, LLPs, individual bankruptcy and insolvency, and unlimited liability partnerships. So actually, in a sense, financial institutions are out of the ambit of that particular code. And you will agree with me that financial institutions do need resolution of a particular kind. And this is a code, or this is a legislation which is supposed to meet that particular requirement.
Okay.
Can I just interject over here? Financial institutions, about the trust is the biggest element in a financial institution.
Beg your pardon?
Trust is the biggest element in a financial institution. Given how long insolvency, the entire procedures take on in India, can we really afford to take so long with a financial institution, number one? Number two, can the government really afford to let any financial institution truly become insolvent? Ultimately, is it not always taxpayer money that comes to the rescue, which is why we have the entire concept of moral hazard in the case of a bank?
Fair enough. A couple of points there. The IBC makes a very, very specific commitment to timelines, and very specific limited timelines.
Timelines are... In Indian context, where our legal system takes decades, if not centuries, timelines, do they have any meaning?
Remember that the Company Law Board is now being collapsed into the National Company Law Tribunal. So there is a very, very sharp focus on strengthening the NCLT. Remember also that the individual and the unlimited liability, insolvency is going to be handled by the debt recovery tribunals, and we're working very hard to ensure that the DRTs are strengthened enough, not only in terms of infrastructure, and also in terms of a certain amount of tweaking of the Act to make the resolution periods very, very short. So the point, your question is absolutely spot on, but that is something that we are trying to work on.
Because if you look at the track record of DRTs and how much has been resolved to them, in fact, not only is it poor, it has been declining over the years. So that is, it's an absolute travesty of justice.
That's the point I'm making, that we've got our work totally cut out.
Now, unless it goes hand in hand with legal reform, whatever acts you pass, completely meaningless.
Both of them, both the points, a strengthening of DRT's capacity to respond to the need to handle resolution processes within very specified periods of time, strengthening both from the point of view of the facilities and the number of DRTs, and also from the point of view of the legal
but
framework.
SICA has not yet been repealed, so doesn't that become a big handicap?
SICA gets repealed actually the moment it's been repealed. The repeal has not been notified. That repeal gets notified the moment the NCLT is set up, which is supposed to be done very shortly.
I just had a question on this. The speech recognized the menace of illicit deposit, and now you're talking about central legislation which will override many state legislations. Can you share a little bit more with us? How does this central legislation now work with the state legislation, and is there a plan to introduce this legislation in the current session of the Parliament?
We do have a number of laws which handle illegal deposit taking. As institutions, SEBI does that, RBI does that, the economic offences wings of various states do that. Right. Under the Companies Act, there are sections which look at this particular issue. Whether the central legislation should override all of these or it should knit these together is something that we are going to see evolving as we go along. There is going to be a degree of stakeholder consultation on that, and that, to my mind, answers your second question, that with that consultation on the annual, this particular session may not be the best session or the right time to bring the legislation to the Parliament.
Just to quickly talk to you about something that a lot of experts in the markets raised this question when they talked about PSU recap. They said, why aren't we looking at stake sale in PSU banks? There is an intent. You wanted to do that way back in 2014. You want to do that in 2015. The markets were high, and now the markets have, gone off some 20-odd% from the recent highs. What is it that the government is waiting for before diluting stake? I mean, that's something that markets are very anxious to know.
What's so special about IDBI that you have a special dispensation for IDBI and not for the other PSBs?
Well, IDBI is something that we're talking about now.
Yeah.
The process, the transformative process has already begun. It's something which is going on.
So what is
it's a good idea
IDBI?
to talk about IDBI right now. And I don't think that with a government which is committed to reform, anything is ever fully off the table.
That was an interesting discussion on divestment dilemma, but how does the budget impact you? Let's find out from Krishna Kumar what's more expensive and what has just gotten cheaper. Krishna with more details.
That's why the budget 2016 has indeed been presented by Finance Minister Arun Jaitley. Lots of talk about all the technical stuff, fiscal deficit, etc., etc. Time now to break it down in terms of what it means for you and me. This is budget for you and me. Things which we'll be paying more for, things that we will be paying less for after this budget comes into effect starting the 1st of April 2016. First up, I would like to start with the bad news. Things which are going to cost more. SUVs, diesel cars, petrol cars, there's a cess on all of them. Large SUVs, petrol SUVs, all kinds of cars. The cess goes up, which means that all your aspirational car purchases are going to get expensive. Branded clothes get expensive. Cigarettes, the duties have been hiked by 10 to 15% on tobacco-related products. So all that is going to expensive. Air travel, your air tickets, we're going to get expensive because the excise duty on air turbine fuel has been increased, which means that your airline is going to increase the price of your ticket. So all of that, air travel, cars, jewelry, cigarettes, all of that is going to get expensive. Can I talk about the good news? Stuff which we will be paying less for. First up, DTH connections, modems and routers. The duties on both these things have been cut short, so which means that these two will cost really less. Solar lamps, notebooks, because the wood chips used in manufacturing of paper, the duty has been completely scrapped, which means that notebooks and stationery items could get cheaper. And of course, rubber footwear, because the plastic insoles, that duty has been cut by a half. So all of these things you will be paying less for. It's a perfect time to start using solar lamps and getting that Wi-Fi connection and getting the DTH and junking your cable connection. So because that's what is going to start getting cheaper. And all of these things, your SUVs, diesel cars, petrol cars, jewelry, air tickets, all of that is going to get expensive. So mixed bag as far as the you and me is concerned when it comes to budget 2016. Back to you in the studio.
Okay, thanks for that, Krishna. Air travel, jewelry, I don't think that's going to bode well for ladies like us. But thanks so much for tuning in. We continue with the budget coverage.